Steve Stoute, and next to him, Ben Horowitz. It's going to be a really fun session. Ben Horowitz was a software executive at Netscape and at Opsware, and is the co-founder with Mark Andreessen of Andreessen Horowitz, one of the hottest venture capital firms in Silicon Valley. Next to him is Steve Stoute, who is the founder of Translation, which is an advertising and marketing agency. He's a former record label executive. He headed, by the way, I like if I read correctly, you were the head of urban music at Sony Music. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I find it's a helpful term because I trip over. I don't understand. We can get into what the differences are among these descriptions. He also is the author of Tanning of America, and I'm going to read the whole title because it's instructive for us this morning. How hip hop created a culture that rewrote the rules of the new economy. So welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Ben, you're all going to see in a few minutes that Ben is the less loquacious of the two. Fair statement for starters.
Well, it depends the situation.
On the subject matter. Ben, would you sort of guide us through this notion that you two both have of the relationship between technology and culture?
Sure. So, and we're talking about really computer science technology. And the thing about computer science technology that a lot of people aren't fully aware of is it's been only very recently that it's produced broad-based consumer products. So if you go back kind of to the origins of the first, there was only one customer for the original computer, that was the US government. And then over time, as the products evolved, they became, they went to consumers first as opposed to the government first and business first. And that's really changed how technology gets adopted today, which is one of the reasons why, like if you watch the old James Bond movies, he's got all these weird tech like the shoe phone and so forth. And then if you watch 24, he's using an iPhone. And that's because it used to be technology went to the government first, now technology goes to consumers first. And that's changed the way it gets adopted and made adoption much less predictable and much more tied into the culture and cultural adoption. And so, as we've been looking at this, and Mark and I first ran into it at Netscape when Netscape was actually one of the first companies that had a product that was broadly adopted by consumers. And how that adoption went, we've been studying it carefully. And then when I met Steve, and Steve came from another point of view where he was there when a band that nobody in kind of broad stream culture knew about called Run DMC completely turned around the Adidas brand, in a song. And so, he developed a kind of mastery of how cultural adoption works. At the same time, we're building a theory of how technology adoption works, and so that's how the conversation started.
I want you to share with everyone. You have unique cultural interests. You've been a hip hop fan for a very long time. Would you just explain how you got interested? And I'd like to hear from you how and why hip hop is important to you.
Well, so it was what I listened to as a kid. So I grew up. I went to college in New York during the golden era of hip hop. 1984 through 1988, when all the kind of bands broke. But it was like being around rock and roll when rock and roll came out. Like it was a big deal, and so that's how I got interested in it. But the thing about hip hop that is different than rock and roll or a lot of the popular music before it is it's super aspirational and very kind of entrepreneurial in nature. So the things that the artists talk about are things about like, how do you make it? How do you compete? How do you succeed in this world? And so in writing about entrepreneurship and in being part of entrepreneurship, it turned out to be, at least for me, like super inspirational.
Steve, you two have discussed the fact that entrepreneurs and celebrities, artists, have a lot in common, have more in common than people would think.
Well, to Ben's point, early on in hip hop, you had to be resourceful. The industry didn't believe in it. There was no investment in the art form. So guys were pressing records up, putting it out, selling it out of their own trunks, doing everything they do to get on, go to radio stations to promote themselves. So they were actually building their business, building their persona as entrepreneurs. And what they did differently than the rock artists was Michael Jackson or Madonna, they would never sell the jacket that they would wear that they made popular.
Why not? It was bad form?
They thought it was bad form. They thought it would be like, it fell under the moniker of selling out. But hip hop artists from day one, they would sell the pants, the clothes, the hat, the shirt, the socks, the sneakers, the car, the rims, the tires, the tint. It didn't make a difference. They would sell it all, and it just became part of what they were doing. That resourcefulness just went that far, and the public at large bought into it.
And I want you to keep running with that, because that's essentially, correct me if I'm wrong, that is your business today with your agency. You work with artists and with other brands, right?
Well, I work with artists. I work with brands on.
Give us an example that you're excited about.
There's so many things that we've done that's made tremendous impact. Whether you were talking about sports stars or athletes, but one of our big clients that we work with on the music side is Budweiser. And we created a festival for them last year called Made in America, which is actually a trademark that they own. And we brought 90,000 people out to Philadelphia, and we had Ron Howard shoot the documentary. So it went from an idea to a concert festival that had Pearl Jam and Jay-Z headline it, and Mike Snow and the Hives and this whole 27 bands. And now it's a film coming out in the fall. And I think that was a perfect integration of using musicians, big brand, to create content. That's just one of the executions that we've done.
You bring up Budweiser, I think that makes perfect sense to me. Big beverage company. They've always been big spenders on events like this. State Farm is one of your clients. What are you doing for State Farm?
Well, State Farm.
They don't fall into my head in the same category of music festival.
Well, I tell you what happened. State Farm fell into a trap where the industry was changing. Geico and Progressive did a very good job of convincing consumers that, especially young people, what do you need insurance for? You might as well just get it cheap and easy. And they convinced people that insurance didn't matter. You needed it because it was legal. So State Farm had 18,000 agents, and that's their big investment, that personal touch. And agents started becoming dinosaurs because people would just get insurance online. So our job was to make agents valuable again, make agents a valuable part of the insurance decision. So what we did was we created this, we used their jingle, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there, and we used it in scenarios, and then the agent showed up, and it kind of had a membership had its privileges sort of thing. The agent came and could get you whatever you want. And then we tied that into very smoothly into Assist, because that's what they do. And then we hired Chris Paul, and we created this character with Chris and his twin brother, Cliff, and they run around assisting the world. And it's a very successful campaign. And State Farm, over the last 3 years, have grown more in their new business than they have in the last 70 years as a result of the work that we've done.
Ben, you make the case that entrepreneurs today, young entrepreneurs, are more in tune with culture than, than entrepreneurs were a generation ago. What do you mean by that?
I think it's out of necessity.
How is it relevant to you as an investor?
So if you do, and it's easy to see, right? Look at the old pictures of Bill Gates, and then look at the new pictures of Jack Dorsey. One's in the culture, one was kind of outside the culture. And that's because entrepreneurs today, because they're mainstream consumer products and because they're following consumer adoption curves, have to be a lot more in tune with what's going on culturally. And the rate of product adoption ends up being as important as anything. And we saw this at Netscape. If you remember, in 1993, people thought the internet was nonsense or was a toy. Like it was not going to be the information superhighway. The information superhighway was a proprietary product that was going to come from Microsoft or Oracle. And the internet couldn't possibly make it because TCP/IP was fundamentally insecure, and it did not have the feature set to be adopted by the kind of for broad business use. Well, it turned out that the technology features were kind of X in the equation, and the culture was X squared. And when people started adopting the internet, it did not matter that the Microsoft network had 10 times the features that the internet had, because the internet, TCP/IP was software. We were going to evolve it. We put SSL in, like we were going to make it secure. And making TCP/IP secure was much easier than getting somebody to adopt MSN. And that's why the internet won. And so in a lot of these things, the rate of cultural adoption ends up being much more interesting than, say, the technological feature set.
You can take the executive out of Netscape, but the old Netscape executive will still bash Microsoft when given the opportunity.
That's right.
Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, well,
Got him.
Go ahead. You want to add something?
yeah, well, that was pretty funny, actually. So as technology has become much more consumer friendly and consumer focused, that's where culture plays a very important role. I remember early on when I first started the company, it was just back in '04, I would ask companies I'd meet, why is the name of your product the XL4432Q? Like, how was somebody supposed to remember that? Why would they walk in, and we would actually walk in the store and try to say, can I get the XL, the new thing, the XL with the screen. And consumer adoption and needing culture allowed brands to give product names, give products personalities. And we've seen this in time. Early on in the internet, everybody was developing the tools that we needed, the basic tools that were needed. And everyone made a lot of money doing that. But now you have 2 or 3 companies doing the exact same thing. So now it's about marketing and culture in order to cause better adoption.
Steve, you're close to Sean Carter. You have been for a long time. Jay-Z, talk a little bit about how he uses technology and how you work with him to use technology.
Well, the Samsung thing is a great example. The Samsung exercise that just took place, where they got the right to release the content of his album 4 days before it came out in brick and mortar and on iTunes. And as a result of it, 20 million people went to go download the album on July 4th. Of course, that caused the internet to crash and all the things that took place. But as a result, between the album itself and then the brick and mortar, he sold 1.7 million albums in 10 days. And that's phenomenal. So putting, again, tech and culture together caused an unusual circumstance. People were buying the phone just to get, if you weren't shopping for a phone during that period of time, you would actually buy the phone and get the album first. So again, culture causing consumer adoption.
And Ben, I made a joke about Microsoft, but you made a really interesting point, which is, to paraphrase what you said, that the great entrepreneur of that era was Bill Gates, and Bill Gates was a nerd. That's not a put down. That's what he was. And Jack Dorsey is cool. He dresses cool. He looks cool. And you're making the case.
But he's also a nerd. But he's in the culture, a nerd in the culture, right?
Huh? He's a dressed well nerd.
I understand, but you're making the case that being in tune is critical. Has this for entrepreneurs who are who are doing technology that is in the culture? Can you point to an investment this is informed for Andreessen Horowitz?
Well, actually, I have an interesting example, which you interviewed Mike Moritz, the great Mike Moritz, a couple days ago.
The great Sir Michael.
Sir Michael. And one of the things that Sir Michael said at the end was kind of, Bitcoin, it's got some flaws that we've studied, which will prevent it from ever being a mainstream payments mechanism. And I couldn't tell if he was head faking everybody so he could go buy a lot of Bitcoin, or whether he was actually serious.
That's shocking. You would suggest that he would do that.
But he's the grandmaster of all that stuff. But the flaw in what he said, which I suspect he knew, is, okay, saying that Bitcoin is flawed now, and which would prevent it from being broadly adopted, is probably not the right thing to look at, because the right thing is, will the current Bitcoin feature set, what is the cultural rate of adoption of that? And if it's fast enough, then Bitcoin is software. It's not actually stone tablets that came down from Satoshi. It's software. And so if it does have a fast enough cultural adoption rate, it's going to metamorphosize into something that's going to take the entire market. And that's really what you ought to be handicapping as opposed to the current feature set. And that's one of the ways we think about investment decisions is through that lens.
And refresh my memory, has Andreessen Horowitz done an investment of that sort?
We've been doing some small things, but I would say
we're
bullish on Bitcoin.
Anything you want to? You're bullish on Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But
cryptocurrency in general, but Bitcoin specifically.
So you've made some investments, but we don't know what they are. Is that what you're saying?
That's right.
Okay. Steve, real quickly, would you tell everybody the thesis of the tanning of America? And I want to ask you the state of play, in your opinion, of race relations in America with what's been going on in the business world, the culture? I know that's a lot. And
Yeah, no, it's not. It's not that much. It's short. I could do it. The tanning of America is a very simple philosophy that just says that there's a generation that grew, the tan generation. Their mental complexion is tan, where no longer do they look at each other and telegraph what one wants because of their race or creed or religion. We look at each other on a shared values basis now, not based off a color line. So you can't look at an African American guy who's 22 years old and like in 1980 you could target how you were going to market to that kid because he fit a certain archetype. That archetype in those boxes have been broken down, and that's the tan generation. And what I discuss in the book is the philosophy on how that came to be and how it came to where it is today, and how we have to shift how we market, how we speak, how the census counts data as a result of this new. I walk down the street, you can walk around LA, you have no idea what anybody is. You don't know if they're Spanish, African American, light skinned, a tanned white man. You can't tell what's going on, and that's a beautiful thing based off of what's taken place over the last 30 years in America.
But the way you describe it is far more optimistic than the way, for example, President Obama described it just a week ago.
Yeah.
He said that this is not broken down at all. It has broken down, but it's not gone, I guess, would have been the president's point.
I see a very bright future for young people who grew up in a day and age where there is an African American president. They're seeing African American figures on television, Hispanic figures on television. People, they're looking at this. I mean, there's a whole generation that doesn't even know what we're talking about. And I'm looking at that generation as our future inventors and philosophers and writers who are going to create the culture around that. As much respect as I have for the president, I think that he was facing a tough thing with the case in Florida. I think there's an issue in Florida that needs to be dealt with, not race relations in America right now.
Questions? Raise your hand and we'll get a mic to you, please. Yes, right there. A fellow advertising industry colleague.
Hey guys,
Please identify yourself.
Stephen Wolf Pereira from Starcom MediaVest Group. Steve and Ben, it's very interesting to see you both on stage. When you look at America, about 70% of the population is Hispanic, 13% African American, and 5+% Asian. So you actually have about a third of the country being multicultural. And we know that multicultural consumers actually over-index when it comes to technology, adoption, all that kind of stuff. Right. What do you think is actually preventing a lot of the tech companies to really reach out to these consumers in a more aggressive way, given that they are the future growth for a lot of these industries?
Yes, actually, you said something that's interesting, which is kind of true and false. You said everybody knows that minorities over-index on these things. I think a lot of people in tech don't know that. I think a lot of people in tech think there's a digital divide. There was kind of pre-mobile technology, but there's not anymore. And now you do have kind of what's we refer to in the vernacular as underrepresented minorities, or however you want to call it, are over-indexing on these things. And that's actually creating some very interesting opportunities. One investment we made in a company called Rap Genius.
Rap Genius?
Rap Genius, yes. Which kind of recognized that, where they said, look, the mission of Rap Genius is to annotate the world. So basically build the knowledge set about the knowledge about everything. So everything from the news to literature to the law. But by starting with rap music, you got to an audience that over-indexes on social media. And then also people who are on the leading edge of culture. So people who listen to hip hop turn out to be extremely interested in culture. And so when you get into other cultural aspects like literature and poetry and news, the editor community that they've built is all over it. And if you look at the numbers that they've been producing, they've got exponential growth in every category catalyzed out of hip hop, which is also the thing that kind of catalyzed music into endorsements and other sorts of things. So we kind of were able to recognize that based on a lot of Steve's work in Tanning in America. And I think you're going to see it changing. I think young people have a very different view of this than old people.
Well, and I wanted to over-index. It's so funny I hear it all the time from marketers, and they don't see a problem with over-indexing. That's the issue. Minorities, whether it be Hispanics, African American, or Asians, they buy products that aren't marketed to them. So, and everybody's fine with that. So they over-index. If marketers, technology companies, and CPG companies for that matter, realize that over-indexing is actually a problem, that it's an opportunity to actually not have them over-index by marketing appropriately and growing within that market, that's one thing. But everybody's fine with over-indexing because I'm not even marketing products to them and they're buying it anyway. That's great. That's actually a problem. And that's the problem I'm trying to fix.
Other questions?
Hi, Steve. And my name is Steven Ozebo. I'm with the government of Catalonia. Been following both your companies very closely with Rap Genius and Translation. Just recently, the rapper Nas had a fellowship named after him at Harvard, and now we have the Nasir Jones Fellowship at Harvard. There's a lot going on with the positive externalities of hip-hop, and globally, too, there's a lot going on with the negative externalities of hip-hop. How are your companies looking at the international markets and seeing what the influence of hip-hop is doing? There are children in China who are learning English through Jay-Z videos. There are children in Japan who are learning how to dress through Run DMC videos from 1982. How are your companies looking at international markets and influencing culture there?
Thanks, Stephen. And by the way, I'm not familiar. I don't understand the negative externalities he's talking about.
I don't understand them either. But that's fine. Everybody should have their point of view here. Look, people in America, young people in America grew up learning how to dress from watching music videos. Not necessarily rap videos, but music videos. Anytime you have an art form that permeates culture the way it did, or the way rock and roll did, it's going to affect vernacular, the way people dress, how they mingle, how they talk, how they relate to one another. So that's bound to happen regardless of rap or whatever, even if it's a local music form that penetrates culture. I think it's very important that what rap culture has done to bring together individuals from around the world. They see each other through that same lens, and there's a commonality that has taken place as a result of that. I don't see the downside in it. I think it's done a very good job of uplifting people and the aspirational aspects of it. You look at a guy like Jay-Z. He's talked profoundly about his humble beginnings. He's never hid his humble beginnings, and you get a chance to track him throughout his whole career. That is the American dream that we've realized over the last 10 years, that this guy's gone from what he was to what he is today. And
but also address his business question, which is, does Jay-Z, is he focused on international markets, or are the international markets coming to him?
No, I think you have to be, it's one market now. Music is global and culture is global. So yeah, he's focused on the international market because he's focused on, growing his business. You can't avoid that. You simply can't avoid being international if you are going to be in a business that's global.
Yeah, and some of it, just for those of you not familiar with Steve's work, one of the kind of breakthroughs in his thinking is, like, if you look at things along racial lines from a marketing perspective, you're going to get yourself into a lot of trouble. That the actual right distinction is, like, people who listen to hip hop is a much more interesting group than people who are African American, because the African American person who doesn't listen to hip hop has probably less in common in terms of driving the culture than maybe the Hispanic person or the Caucasian person who does. And so looking at it through the lens of the culture and who's in the culture and who's driving the culture ends up being very important from a business context and also from a kind of the global culture.
Question in the back there.
From Omnicom Group. Quick question. Samsung, interesting relationship with Jay-Z. What do you think about this growing trend of celebrities as CMOs, chief innovation officers, heading up organizations now, heading up these brand companies?
I think some of them are real and some of them are fake, right? So I think there's certain artists that are getting a check, and as a result of the check, they don't want to be called spokesperson because that's just passé at this point. So they give them some brand title to make them seem like they're an executive, and that seems cool. That's fine. Yeah. However, there are certain relationships that make absolute sense because you see shared values. You see what the brand has and what the artist has and the commonality and how those things can come together to create a value that's bigger than both of them individually. So in the case of Samsung and Jay-Z, you've seen that. Samsung wasn't about endorsing Jay-Z. They was endorsing his content running through their device. That was more important to them than him holding the phone. And I think as you start seeing more smart deals laid out, whether it be sports stars or artists or whoever it is, celebrities that have a fan base that they can bring to that brand, you're gonna start seeing a lot more of those deals. You're gonna start seeing bad ones as well. I don't think all of them are good. I think there's a couple ones that are great. And then when we all look back as marketers or brand owners, we applaud them because they make perfect sense.
Steve, so Ben and Steve were at the Jay-Z concert in Chicago on Monday night, is that correct?
How do you know that?
Because Ben told me that backstage.
He's an investigative journalist.
Come on.
I thought it was about big data. I'm like, how did you know I was at the...
And Steve, would you share with everybody your thesis on why Jay-Z and Justin Timberlake collaborate with each other? And the reason I want you to share this quick story is that it's a really interesting, there's an interesting comparison with collaboration in the technology industry, the frenemies, you know?
Well, so hip hop culture, just the culture, and I keep stressing the culture because some of you guys in here may not like the music at all. But if you focus on the culture, I think we could all rally around the
Just
fact
from
that
looking
the culture.
at the audience, what makes you think that?
I have no idea. I just a hunch. The culture cause always was about collaboration. So you would never see. So Justin and Jay-Z are two big artists, two big global superstars. You would never see the Rolling Stones take Coldplay out on a stadium run. You would never see U2 and the Rolling Stones tour together. But yet, this generation, you'll see Justin Timberlake and Jay-Z. And the reason for that is it's just the whole culture has been collaborative. There's not been any funny frenemies that has taken place. And as a result of that, you have the value of what these guys both bring to the table, and you have their fans now cross-pollinating. That doesn't happen in other industries as much as I've seen it with hip-hop, with the hip-hop generation and the way they've seen the world. So I was asking Ben, why doesn't that happen as much with technology? And I never got a clear answer on it, but I think it's just people.
Brian Chesky and John Donahoe. It's like Jay-Z and Justin Timberlake.
I think that, and maybe I'm stretching, but I think that young technology companies partner earlier and often than they did a generation ago.
You know, I think that's right. And I was just joking, but I think that's right. Brian Chesky's running like the biggest new marketplace, and John Donahoe's running the biggest existing, and here they are on stage, and they get together all the time, and they trade notes. And I think a lot of that, you know, it comes from the change in the culture and just like how you think about the world and how you think about business and how do you think about the size of the opportunity. And I think in music, right, the markets have gotten much bigger but much different, and in technology that's happened as well. Much more people are kind of listening to music and into the culture now. Much more people are adopting technology, and the old ways of a very kind of limited market that you were targeting where you've got to have your piece is just, it's different now.
Ben Horowitz, Steve Stoute, thanks for showing us your friendship and your partnership and collaboration. Thanks for being here.
And thank you, Adam.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Adam.
Thank you.